Welcome to Season 2 of the Culinary Saijiki podcast. This season, I'm going back to haiku's roots, pun intended, and focusing on how agriculture and food show up in the work of the classical poets. For more food and haiku goodness, you can read the blog at culinarysaijiki.com. And if you would like to be a guest this season, go to the blog and fill out the contact form. You can support the project by going to buymeacoffee.com/culinarysaijiki or simply share this show with whoever you think would enjoy it. All right, let's get started with today's topic. All right, welcome to this solo episode where I'm going to divert from the theme of the show a little bit to talk about my forthcoming chapbook, Postcards from Texas, from Cuttlefish Books. And, what's the point of having a book coming out and having a podcast if you're not going to use that to talk about it, right? So, let me get started. I have a couple of housekeeping things. First, we do have that community open mic coming up at the end of the month, and I would like to give a shout out to Philip for letting me know about the 404 error that was happening when he tried to send me a voice memo. I suspect that's been happening to a couple of people. I actually am recording this much later at night than I would like to, because during my standard recording time, I spend it on a very unsatisfying customer support chat with my hosting platform, which is Spotify for podcasters. What I found out is and Spotify for podcasters used to be called Anchor. That's what they were when I signed up with them, and they made a lot of changes when they formally merged with Spotify. And one of the big changes is that in order to send me a voice memo, you have to create a Spotify for Podcasters account, even if you have no intention of having a podcast of your own. I was super bummed to find that out, and they say that's a security feature, and I certainly don't blame them for wanting to do their best to keep their customers safe. There is a lot of online harassment out there. I do feel as a creator that should be a choice I get to make whether you need to have an account or not to leave me a voice memo. To me, that creates a barrier of entry for my particular audience that I just don't want to be there. And so I'm sorry about that. Certainly, if you would like to leave me a direct memo via the podcast link, you are absolutely welcome to do that. But I know people just may not be interested in having yet another internet account. That's certainly how I feel sometimes. So, if you would like to participate in the community open mic, but don't want to set up an account, I still welcome your poems. Just, record it on your phone and email me the file. It might be big enough that you have to share it with Google Drive, and that would be totally, totally fine with me. I will put my email in the show notes, or if there's another way you want to get it to me, just reach out. But yes, so please still participate in that community open mic. I want to hear your stuff. And if you find it a pain in the butt to send me a voice memo, just email me, share on Google Drive a file, and that will be perfect. Let me know if you have questions, please. And because of this little kerfluffle, I am going to extend the deadline, and I'm just going to pull up my calendar real quick so I give you the correct deadline, because that's a thing I would totally not do. But that new deadline will be Monday the 21st, 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So that is what that will be. Anyway, again, I want to hear your stuff, no matter what format you get it to me in, as long as it's audio. And check the show notes for the rest of the guidelines. All right, if you want to support the show financially, you can buy me a coffee. That August bonus recipe is going to come out pretty soon. It's on my to-do list for the second half of the week. And if you have other things to spend your money on, just share the show with someone you think might like it. That's really one of the best things you can do. All right, so without further ado, I am going to tell you about Postcards from Texas. And I'm going to start with the opening haiku because it is one of the few in this collection that is food themed. Making the coffee, truck stop strong, new school year. Making the coffee, truck stop strong, new school year. So this chapbook opens at a point of transition, the transition from summer vacation into back to school, the transition of summer into autumn, as much as one gets autumn in Texas. And for me, it was going back to teaching, although honestly, I never had full summers off. I was always teaching summer school. But there was something different about going from the short summer sessions into the long standard semester. So, yes. So I would also like to just give a note here that I'm not the only Cuttlefish Books author this summer. Leonard D. Moore and Julie Bloss-Kelsey are with me in that. By the way, I apologize for the sniffing and throat clearing. I got a terrible post-COVID secondary sinus infection, and it's still clearing up. So this is just the way it is. It's been an interesting summer. But anyway, Leonard D. Moore and Julie Bloss-Kelsey, they have some great chapbooks too. So you can pre-order mine, or you can pre-order the whole bundle for only $20. That's a pretty good deal. 3 chapbooks for $20. Honestly, that's kind of amazing. So, anyway, how this book happened. This is, it's called Postcards from Texas because some of you know this story, but in summer of 2016, after 20 years of not being able to really see or contact my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he came back into my life, to my family's life, and the whole reason for that separation is a long and complicated story, and it's not only my story to tell. And I'm just sort of wary about putting a lot of drama out on for public consumption anymore. 10 years ago it would have been a different story, but not really anymore. But suffice to say that 20 years is a long time, and I was so glad to get to reconnect with him. He and I, in many ways, had a lot in common that I never really entirely, knew until that point. We're the only 2 people in my my biological family who like camping. I guess I get that from him. That's just lurking in the DNA somewhere. And my partner John and I, camping a lot, hiking a lot, even just little day trips to parks, state parks near Austin. I would get a postcard and send it to my grandfather, and he just loved getting these postcards, whether we were out of state or nearby. He really enjoyed them. And at the end of 2020, he passed away, and he didn't die of COVID, and we'll never know one way or the other, but I really believe in my heart that if COVID hadn't happened, I believe he's one of those secondary casualties of COVID. If the medical system and the infrastructure hadn't just gotten so messed up as we were dealing with COVID, I do believe he would still be here with us. Again, I don't know that. I'll never know that, but it's to me, that's what it feels like, and it just it really broke my heart to lose him again so soon. And so, in many ways, I didn't really send my grandfather haiku. He was not super into poetry. But when I think of haiku, I think of something that could fit on a postcard, and I am doing the Poetry Postcard Fest for the 3rd year, I think. I think this is my 3rd year doing it, and maybe it's my 2nd. No, sorry, maybe it's my 4th. The point is I'm doing it again. I've been doing it quite a bit. I really enjoy it. And I pretty much at this point, I only send haiku. So anyone on my list is getting a haiku from me. Last year, haiku poet Aiden Castle was on my list, and that was just the coolest thing to have another haijin on there, a dedicated haijin. Anyway, so that's sort of how I shaped it conceptually. And the timeline of it opens in fall, and it really covers sort of from fall to summer, my last year living in Texas. Some of the poems, most of them were written in that final year. Some are a little older. I think the oldest goes back to 2018. There's a smattering from 2018, 2019, and 2020 in there. But most of them are from fall 21 to June 22. But again, this isn't formally a sequence. Like Leonard's chapbook, A Million Shadows at Noon, that is a haiku sequence. This isn't formally a sequence. I was really trying to capture sort of a feeling rather than something so strictly chronological. So I brought in some older poems there that I felt really captured that mood of what I was trying to convey. And in terms of the process, I didn't consciously at any point set out to say, oh, I'm going to write a haiku collection about this. In the year that I was quitting my job and looking for a new job and, figuring out where we were going to live and plans were made and changed and all that, I wasn't consciously thinking about trying to document that last year, especially because we weren't entirely sure when everything was going to actually go down, because John was teaching abroad and we weren't sure about job things, and it was just, it was pretty wild. I know I wasn't consciously thinking about documenting it in any way. I didn't actually start putting this together until Joshua Gage of Cuttlefish Books reached out and invited me to send him something. And so, he asked if I had a manuscript, and I said yes, even though I didn't formally have one, but I've been sort of putting manuscripts together and sending them out to some of the, haiku chapbook contests that are out there, never getting very far. But also, it wasn't the right time. They just weren't cohesive enough. But so I said I had a manuscript. I didn't really. But when I thought about what did I want to do, at the time I think when Joshua asked me, I'd been in Missouri for about 6 months and been in this house about 4 months. And I didn't have very many Missouri haiku yet, in part because I lived there less than a year, and in part because that was at a point when my creative life was at a serious standstill. I was hard-pressed to write any poems at all. I wasn't really, I was grieving my old life. I was adjusting to a new life. I was adjusting to living with my partner for the first time, to living with someone, a partner for the first time since getting divorced, nearly almost a decade before that. It was a big transition, and it was hard. And I was in a super toxic job situation that made me miserable. I was not sleeping. It is very funny, as a side note, a lot of people based on my social media thought I was super happy and thriving. And I'll just say I would say, the first month was just, I was in such upheaval that I didn't have any, I didn't have a lot of feelings. But July 2022 to May 2023 was one of the roughest times in my life. I say it was rougher than when I was getting divorced. I'm not sure if that's true. It might just be that the pain of that and the memory of that has dulled. But either way, I was not thriving. It's only about in the past 2 months that I actually feel like I'm myself again. Anyway, So I didn't have many Missouri haiku. I had a ton of Texas haiku, and it did feel weird to be like, oh, well, I'm a Missouri poet now, but all of my work is really still connected to Texas. And then I thought, well, let this be my goodbye letter. Like, let this be my belated farewell to Texas. And so that's what I did. All right. So I'm going to read another haiku that's food related, and then I will talk a little bit more about sort of the philosophical aspects of this collection. Thanksgiving Day. Last pekins ripen along the fence. Thanksgiving Day. Last pekins ripen along the fence. And, Texas is a complicated state, and I have complicated feelings for it. In my heart, I will always love the geography, the place itself. I still remember very well, before I lived there, going to visit a friend for New Year's, a college friend who had gone to Austin for grad school. And I got there on December 30th, and she met me at the airport. I think we took a cab from the airport. I don't think she drove me, because she was flying in. She was also flying in from Christmas, so we flew into Austin about the same time, and we took a cab to her apartment. And I just remembered, it's January and it's 75 degrees and there are palm trees, and this is amazing. And we cleaned up, and we went up to South Congress, like the really trendy part of South Congress. It was very cool then, and it's just super trendy now. And at the time, it was like where there's a fancy hotel, there was just like a church parking lot that pretty much anyone could park at on weekdays. And we were at the bus stop, and I remembered looking up Congress Avenue and seeing the Capitol in the distance, and something about those low Texas buildings and the big, big sky. I miss that sky so much. And the building in the distance. And I thought, I'm going to live here until the day I die. And clearly that didn't happen. But I still love the place as a geography. But Texas is politically complicated. So with this book, it's my love of Texas, and it's also my feelings about the gun issue. It's my feelings about the out-of-control housing crisis in Austin. It's my feelings about how climate change is clearly making it harder to live here, to the point where, part of why we decided to leave is we don't know if by the time we're old we'll be able to live there. It seemed like a strategic decision to get out now. And those were hard feelings to sit with. It was hard to sit with. This is a place that I love so dearly, a place that I still, on some level, want to live in until the day I die. And also, it doesn't feel like that's something that can actually happen. And I guess saying that, I'm like, oh, this was actually harder than my divorce, because by the time I got divorced, I didn't want any more of that till death do us part. And neither did he. Just to be clear, neither did he. It was not a good marriage, and it was poor choices, too young. But by the end of that, there was no desire on either party to stay. And leaving Texas, there was still a desire on my part, on some level, to stay, even though it just didn't seem sustainable. And what I really wanted to try to do was craft a cohesive collection that, small as it was, and in these tiny poems, could hold these big feelings. And, when you finally, as the reader, read that, that's up for you to decide. But for me, it did that for me. And getting to this point, doing the final proofs, it has given me some sense of closure. And I still miss Texas. I will always miss it. Part of me is always going to be sad that I couldn't live there for the rest of my life. That it was too expensive and getting too hot. And it seemed like we were going to be water refugees. It makes me sad that it will probably always make me sad that I had to make that choice. Last night, John and I were sitting out enjoying the much more temperate evening weather on our patio. And we talked about the things that we love about St. Louis, and we talked about some of the things we miss about Texas. And I was getting really choked up. So I don't think I'll ever really be over it. But this did give me some resolution. All right. Another haiku. There's more food-ish ones here than I thought there were. It's just like my conversation with Elliot last week. New moon. Blood orange juice between my fingers. New moon. Blood orange juice between my fingers. And this is in many ways a grief collection. It's not, I won't say it's like outright sad, because there's the whole spectrum of emotion in here, but there is, and I wasn't conscious of this at the time. I wasn't selecting poems being like, yeah, let this be all about like my grief and all this, That's not what I was doing, but that certainly came out, and the more like when I read some excerpts from it at HNA, and when I've talked about it with people, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of sadness in here, but like in a good way. But this is dedicated to 4 people. This is my shortest collection of my shortest poems, and it has the biggest dedication. It's dedicated to 5 people. I'm looking at an old draft where I hadn't slotted one in yet. Because I was saving that for another book, but that book is still in process, and I was just like, let's just put it all together. But it's dedicated to Devorah Weingarten, Wade Martin, Paul Whipple, John De Palma, and Joe Bratcher III. 3 of those... One of them, obviously, is my grandfather, although not the one that I sent postcards to. But Paul Whipple, John De Palma was the grandfather I sent postcards to. And Devorah Weingarten and Wade Martin and Joe Bratcher were all hugely influential in my writing life in some way. Devorah, she actually died before COVID, but she needed a book dedicated to her. Like, if I'd come up with another book before this one, she would have gotten that one, but I didn't. So she's there, but everyone else died during COVID. Not necessarily of COVID, but in COVID. And so it's dedicated to all of the people that I lost at some point or another in my last little bit in Texas. All people who were so important to me. Even if they maybe didn't necessarily know it. They were all people who were really changed my life for the better. And so I wanted this, my first haiku book, to go to them. And I kind of promised John that like my 3rd book, if I ever published it, would be dedicated to him. But, they're always kind of dedicated to him. And I promise the 4th book, John, you'll get that one. It'll be all yours. Late pepper harvest in a stoneware bowl. Christmas lights. Late pepper harvest in a stoneware bowl. Christmas lights. So with that, I think those are the main things for me. And I interviewed Reinhardt at my personal blog, not the Culinary Saijiki, and it was interesting to hear about his process. I think he and Julie both, in different ways, their books were done in more or less one sitting, aside from revision. Like the first drafts were done in more or less one sitting, and it's fascinating to me. Like, and then mine is just sort of a collection of mostly 1 year, but a few other years in between. You know, and it doesn't have to be literal. You know, it doesn't have to be these were all from this 1 year. Frank O'Hara didn't really write all of his lunch poems at lunch, just enough of them. But it was about, again, that feeling about trying to cultivate all of my love for Texas and all of my frustration with Texas and all of what it felt like to leave. I would like to thank Joshua Gage of Cuttlefish Books for inviting me to submit and for being really patient with me, because as he was working with me on this, I was still working a toxic job and still just not in my good place, a good place mentally at all. And so, you know, I was very slow. I was very slow in replying to emails, and so I appreciate, you know, that patience. It was my transition year. It was my grief year. And also for being okay with me being super nitpicky about formatting things and making sure that dedication page in particular looked just right. I thought it might be a few more years before I got to have a haiku collection come out. So I'm very excited to be doing this, and I just wanted it to be as good as it could possibly be. And it makes me excited that, you know, Cuttlefish is based in Cleveland, and Cleveland is where I grew up. So I may live in Missouri now, and this book may be about Texas, but, you know, my heart is also in Cleveland. My heart is just in so many places. This is why I have so many feelings. So it is nice to be chosen to be published from a place in your hometown. And this wasn't in my notes, but it's been on my mind. When I was at HNA, it was the very first night we were there, and it was so funny. Ben and I couldn't check into our rooms because the key system was not working, so we just had our stuff on a cart, and we're in there in the hall, and I hadn't gotten to change, and we'd driven for I don't know however many hours. I was just ugh. But I saw Agnes and our friend Claire hadn't ultimately been able to make it. So she said, "You're the only other Texas poet here." And I was like, "Oh, well, I live in Missouri." And she's like, "You're still a Texas poet." And maybe it was offhand, but oh goodness, how much that meant to me and how much I needed to hear that in that moment. And that's probably something I will remember forever. So thank you, Agnes, for saying that. Even if, you know, it didn't seem that serious to you at the time, it really, it meant so very much to me. All right, one more. I don't like to explain my haiku too much because they're so short, right? The backstory doesn't always matter. But this was written on my last hike in Big Bend National Park. A friend of mine who I'd been out there with twice, I said, we need to take one more drive out there and go to Big Bend one more time before I move, because I don't know when I'll have the chance to go to Big Bend National Park again, which is just one of my most favorite places on earth. And I wrote this on our last hike. Skyline Trail. Our last beer already warm. Skyline Trail. Our last beer already warm. So thank you for letting me tell you all about my chapbook. It is just the fact, when I got the pre-order link, it just, on the 1st of August, it just made my whole month. You have no idea. It's been a long time. My last chapbook, which was a free verse chapbook, came out in 2016, and the chapbook that I built for my MFA thesis, I sent it out for 2 or 3 years and never got any traction, and decided to self-publish, but in the midst of moving and changing jobs 3 times and all that, obviously, there have been some challenges there as well. And it was really getting to the point where I didn't ever know if I'd ever do any kind of book again. So it feels so good to be doing one and to have it be in haiku, which is my heart genre. So with that, just to wrap up, the reminders. The open mic is still happening. Apparently you need to set up a Spotify for Podcasters account to leave me a voice memo, a thing I disagree with. I have already lodged my disagreement with them, but who knows when that will change. So if you want to just record your haiku and email them to me, that is just fine. Absolutely fine. I would be thrilled. And again, you can always support the show financially at buymeacoffee.com/culinarysajiki or share this with whoever you think would like it. Over on the blog, I talk about my experiences with the translations in the Sound of Water, the anthology edited by not Mark Hamill. Oh my God. Sam Hamill. I got almost to the way to the end of the show. This is the one thing I screwed up. Anyway, it is Sam Hamill of Copper Canyon Press. His translations of Basho, Busan, and Issa, along with some other classical haiku poets. And because that is one of my source texts, I wrote about how my relationship to that particular book, in fact, that was my first anthology of classical haiku that I ever had, and how my relationship to that book has changed over time. I had a lot of fun writing that. And if you would like me to write more about the source texts I use and how I feel about the translations and my relationship to them and to these translators, please let me know, because I'm doing the Sealy Challenge right now. I'm reading a book of haiku a day, and I stumbled upon a collection of, it was a translation of Basho's work, and it is very interesting. And this person took some very fascinating liberties, and I would love to talk about it, but I don't know if other people would like to know about it. So please let me know if you are interested in my sort of reading responses to some of the source texts I'm using. And of course, I've spent however much time now, 23 minutes, talking about my chapbook. That is pre-order. The pre-order link is in the show notes. You can buy it individually, but let me tell you, Reinhardt and Julie, they have written some fantastic books as well. So you might as well just get yourself the bundle and really, really treat yourself, if that's feasible. In fact, if you don't want to buy me a coffee and you just want to buy the bundle instead, take that money and invest it in them, I'm sure Julie and Reinhardt would be super appreciative. And if you bought the book, either mine or the whole bundle, and you would like a thank you postcard in the mail, I would love to send you one, but I don't have a lot of addresses, so if you bought it, either mine or the whole bundle, send me your address. I will send you a thank you postcard. It would make me super happy to be able to do that. I love sending postcards. All right, and with that, I am tired. It is late. I haven't done my Sealy Challenge book for the day. So, thank you for listening.